equal result in terms of so a lot of conservatives have Turkish access.
Okay, all the material should be up on the website. We're just going to go through. This week, what we're going to do is do factor analysis. So we were going to try and get to regression by now, but we haven't. But I still think this is a really awesome method you're going to learn, and it will be very useful for you. Actually, Melanie, you had in in the article you studied, they've actually used these methods. So now you will understand several paragraphs you didn't understand before, and you can even experiment with them. The learning objectives are pretty straightforward. We're going to learn about factor analysis and also Cronbach alpha. I will run to I've got a couple of handy code for cleaning your data. I don't think I'll actually run through them now, but if you want to take a look at them later, they are what I think is really useful here is this cheat sheet for manipulation and data cleaning. So many of you are still doing manipulation and data cleaning, and this is using tidyr and mostly tidyr and dplyr, which are the methods that Young had taught you last semester, and I've been teaching you. It includes like lots of very useful functions. It's sort of not that this table itself, this cheat sheet, won't teach you how to use them, but it'll teach you can go and look for them at the very least. I've got some examples of it here. So some of the really useful ones, and notice I've started using the name of the library or the package, then double colon, and then the name of the command. One of the advantages of this method is you don't actually have to load libraries anymore if you do this. Right, which I was like, actually, that is really handy. So you install packages, but after that, you'd never have to load another library again. So I'd be pretty encouraging of people to do that. It also just makes sure that you run the right function. So filter allows you to, for example, say filter sex double equals to 1, means so filter out, say, men or women. So filter is really useful if you're trying to divide by groups. Distinct is a way to remove duplicate rows. It's probably not something many of you have to do, but if you are doing some data cleaning, it's a really handy function. Select, you've already seen, but this allows you to select the variables that are then going to go into your models or into your correlation table. Yes? Mutate is make a new variable, though I've got to admit I still think it's very difficult. It's easier just to create one and use the recode function we learned last week. Several people have been using left join. Did you get left join working? Ah, very good. We had 2 people use a left join to join together, like, say, transport data or GDP data from the IMF with a some sort of survey that had country-level data or city-level data, and it could join on the country and merge the 2 data sets together, which is pretty cool. So R allows you to do that. These are just different ways to bind rows, very similar to some functions built into R. And grouped by, for some stuff, I tried to use it. It doesn't work for everything, but this can be one that works like filter. But say you wanted to do filter by sex and you wanted both at one table for men and one table for women, then this actually does, this says, don't get rid of the other bit, just run everything after this as 2 separate groups. And drop NA is a way to drop missing variables just from those cases once you've selected them. So, do you want me to go through this a little bit more, or do you want me to get on with the main show? You have a preference? Do you want some more? Do you want me to show you a few examples of this, or are you? You've got, there's nothing.
Just have a question regarding the last one.
Yes.
For example, if I have a value that I don't want it in my variable, how I just get rid of that with the last one?
If you want it, this is like remove NA cases. So this is the thing we did last week where we said, so say for example, you've got a data set,
Yeah.
and it's got like 6 variables or whatever,
Yeah.
and there's missing data here and 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 here, right? If you run a regression that only involves these 3, then you only need to drop these 3 cases, right? And so I've actually got an example, so I think I will run through the example. Does everyone want to open up their R and we can all do this together? Let's make it work. And we're going to do a little bit of regression because we've already started touching on regression. So just load these libraries and then load the LGA, and we create a mean unemployment here. This is just the variable which is going to hold a value. And then we're going to run one regression. That's just the whole data set. So you can read it here. It says take the local government area data set and then select Gini income and unemployment and robberies for that area. So it's just pulling out 3 variables. It's throwing everything else away. And then it's saying drop any of those that have got missing value, any rows of that have missing values. And then it's actually running a linear regression model saying how much is robbery driven by the inequality, Gini coefficient, and by the level of unemployment in a data set. One thing that I've had to do here, which is complicated, or tricky, is that linear model is a base function and it's not compatible with the tidy universe. So in the tidy universe, I'll make this bigger, sorry. In the tidy universe, we've sort of been learning about this, but in the tidy universe, which is things like ggplot and dplyr and others, they have a convention which is, so if you do a command, any command will go any function y equals, whatever, this first argument, if it's tidy, is always the data set. It's just the data set, it's only the data set, and it's always the data set. So this is are you following me vaguely or not really? You have no idea what I'm talking about? No? Vaguely? No? Okay. So I'll just step back. So if you look at these, we've learnt last week and the week before about using this symbol, right? Which means put into, yes? And the great thing about it is that it allows us to lay out our data much more clearly. So instead of having a function that went, something like f, g, h, x, like this, which is a bit complicated, and especially gets complicated if you end up having to have arguments after each one. So you go x, NA is NA true, blah, blah, blah. Then you have to close it, and you have to put other functions for this one, and then you have to close it, and you have to put other functions for this one. And then you've got to somehow remember which part over here is related to which one of these, right? And you're just like, my brain hurts, it doesn't work. You get me? Yeah? So, instead, what the tidy method allows, the tidy system and the use of this function allows us to do is to lay it out simply. So we lay out, we go start in the middle and we say X is our data set, and we're going to put it into, well, first place we put it is into H. So we put it into H, we don't need to specify, it just assumes it's the first variable. Robin, the first argument, sorry, an argument. So this is a function, it's a function, and this is argument 1, argument 2, etc. Yeah? So the first argument is assumed to be X, or is always X, just puts it there, and then you'll put whatever other commands you want, or other arguments you want, and you pass it to G, which passes it, and then pass it to F, which I think has some arguments as well, right? Does that make sense? Yes?
So in that case, where shall we put n equals to 2? And n equals to...
And this one here, sorry, yeah, so NA equals true is a H thing, so actually it would go here. Yeah, that's where it would go. I'm going to hand out the little markers. I want to know whether we're all green or red at this stage, because... Okay, 2, 1. Oh, you got it.
I think I'm going to get nothing today.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
I remember green.
Jack.
Greens. You got greens? I don't know. I don't know how this is going. I don't give you.
Oh, sorry.
Where's the rest of the grains? He pocketed the grains. That was you.
Are you going to get Irish today?
Yeah. Well, maybe low hopes for all of you. Okay, so I want a green or a red for feeling comfortable with this. Red, green, 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 red, red. Okay, all right, no worries. That's a good. That's a
bit abstract for me.
That is a bit abstract. Let's make it. Let's talk through an example. Yes, exactly. Okay, so and I think if I do this one, we can break it down into parts, and then it starts to feel better. So let's just take all this up here, and we're going to go into R. I have way too much open. Script. Clean that up. Yes. Okay, so I've loaded this here, and we'll load up the libraries and the data set. So we have a variable LGA, right? Now we're going to calculate, in this case, we're not actually going to use this, so all right, we'll just go to here. So LGA, let's just run this first bit. LGA into, I think we have to actually get rid of this or it will really starts to ruin things. But I'm just going to put LGA into this. So what should this do? It should just run the select function like I had LGA there. Yep,
Okay. Yeah.
it's exactly the same.
Okay.
I know, it's cool, huh? It's like, yeah, not abstract. So these should, let's just get rid of this. Let's hash out this row.
So LGA is just data set.
LGA, right? So this, let's run this normal. It should spit it out. And so it spits out a data set down here. Yeah? It's only given the first 10 rows.
Yeah.
Are we all good? Green.
Correct.
Green. Green. Okay, good. So then we say, well, actually, it's nicer. Just let me promise you, if we lay it out using this magneto, whatever it's called, I can't even remember what it's called, but put into symbol, right? So we go, the pipe, sorry, it's called a pipe. We use the pipe. Ready? We run it, and it does the same thing. Okay? So then we're just going to keep going with the piping. So this one will now, we're going to just go to here. We'll just look at what each one does. This one will drop NA. So it should, yeah, so now notice the one above here. Oh, sorry, I'm going to make this bigger. I apologize. Bloody hell. You've got to tell me when I make things really small. Is that too big?
No, it's okay. I can see
think
it
it's just
well.
good.
Okay, so actually I might just... Okay, here you can see with this one, without the NA, it's selected ones with NA. Yeah? We run it here, no NA. Now, you may say, well, why don't you just run the drop NA first and just run drop NA? Well, one of the reasons is that the LGA dataset has missing data for every single value. So let's just pretend let's run LGA on its own. And we get however many, there's over 100, there's 129 rows, right? Let's now run LGA and drop all the missing values. Because remember I've told you, don't just drop them immediately because you'll lose all your data. It actually got some variables. I'm wrong. I thought it would lose everything. But it's thrown away a lot. It's only got about 57 rows now. Are you following? Whereas here, I think it'll have more because it's only throwing away those. Yeah, this has got 89 rows of complete data for these three. Are we following? Yes, 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 yes. No. Okay, what I'm saying is, remember I drew this table up here? Yeah. If I deleted every row, I'm so sorry. But if I deleted just from the very beginning, anyone who didn't answer a question or any case that was missing, I would have to throw out most of the data, right? So because everyone screws up one question, right? And so what we do instead is we just use this drop NA when we're running the commands after we've selected the variables that are going to go in this analysis. So in this case, we might now run a correlation and we'll run a regression or run a summary table and we'll only throw out the ones that are missing on these variables. Good?
Yeah.
Good? Good?
Yep.
Yes.
Here's a question. How to find out which packages those functions are from?
Well, the ones that I've been running, these ones.
Yeah, for instance, how do you know LM is from stats?
Oh, yeah, right. That's a very good question. So how do you know? Right. How do you know which package they're from? Well, there's two ways to know. If you go to help, which is always a bit slow, but let's just go to help and we'll type in LM, which stands for linear model. This is the regression function. Look in the top right here. Summary. LM is part of the stats package. Very cool, huh? Now, the other way you do it is you go to Google and you type in LM in brackets in R or something, and it will bring up the PDF of that package it's from.
So sorry, is that piping command in a package or is it?
Yeah, it is in a package. You normally need to load tidyr or dplyr. Dplyr here, I think. Have I got tidy? I don't even. If you load dplyr, which I think stands for dataplier, quite a cute name. I know, yeah. Get in there, then it will work. But I think it's actually from one called Magneto or something. But what happens is because they all load the ones that they're dependent on, if you load dplyr, it loads tidy, and tidy loads blah, blah, blah. Good? 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 Okay. So let's keep going. So this one I'm running, we haven't really done regressions, but we've done a little bit of regressions. So this is the command for running a regression. It's just LM. And this says, please, I've screwed up. So we're now saying in this, put LGA into and select these three variables, drop any rows that have got any and A's in them on those three variables, and then run a regression where we try to predict robbery, the number of robberies there are per 100,000 people, on the Gini coefficient of income, which Young has calculated, and the unemployment rate.
So,
Does that make sense or not really?
what is the dependent and independent?
So robbery is the dependent variable. So you can see here robbery, there's sort of like 24 per 100,000, 62 per 100,000, 8 per 100,000. Yep, these are all the different local government areas. Unemployment goes like 5.8, 7.2, sorry, 3.6. Calculate. Yep, that's unemployment. And Gini coefficient is from 0 to 1, where low is very equal and high is very unequal. Greens? Green, thumbs up. Green, thumbs up, yes?
I didn't put it into a model.
Yeah.
How do you?
Well, we're going to learn that later, and so I don't... You did learn it with Young, and remember we did this in week 2 or 3, where we looked at how being female gave you one more quiz score, or one less quiz point on the quiz. Remember that one? Well, we're doing another one of those models. So we're saying, if 1 unit of unemployment goes up, how many more robberies are there? Or we say, if the Gini coefficient went, theoretically, from 0, perfect equality, to 1, perfect inequality, how many robberies would we get? Good?
So that's, yeah, so you run that code.
I'm going to run, that's the code there.
That's the result.
No, I haven't run it yet. No, I haven't run it. That's not the result. This here is the data set. This is just us looking at the data set. Sorry.
No, I'm intrigued. Run it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm just going to, one of the things, I will actually do this bit. So it turns out when we run LM, the results from it are crap. So we actually need to put the results into a function called summary, and that gives us really nice results. So that's what I'm just going to run. So you can see how, look at the nesting we've done here, right? LA into select, into drop NA, into LM. Oh, the other thing just to say on LM, this is where I started explaining all this. LM is not conformatory to tidyr. So tidyr, when this gets passed, it goes to the first thing in select. But that means select has to expect it to be the data. That function select.
Right. Yep.
And then drop NA has to think that the first thing that's coming back is the data, etc. Yes? Yeah, no, I'm not sure no. This is fine. This is really important stuff and useful stuff for us all to do. Otherwise, so there's 2 things actually happening here. So I'll just write this here for you. And it took me a long while to understand this. I went and had an argument with someone about 2 months ago, and then I went, why did you do this? So tidyr has 2 big properties. One is the first argument of every function is a data frame. Or the data frame, I should say. It's the data frame for the analysis. Yeah? And it's a standardized format. Number 2 is that it always returns the complete data frame. So when you run a function, right, any function, you say mean of age, that returns, as in it sends back to the screen or wherever, a value. That's the return value, right? So if I run, and I'll just show you, just so you understand what return is. Mean of, say, LGA unemployment. So what's the mean unemployment? Notice this is not going anywhere. It doesn't have this arrow and so forth. So it's actually just going to spit it out to the screen. Yep, so it'll appear down the bottom here. Yes? So you go Control Enter, and it returns NA. Oh, screwed up because why? Because we didn't put in NA dot equals true, I think. There you go. So the mean, but what it's returned is this. Yes, so the function, are we all following or not? Are we following? Am I over-explaining? Are you getting it?
Yep.
You understand? Who understands, who doesn't understand, who understands return? Green. Who understands return? Yeah, okay. So you got return. So it always returns, so a tidy function, tidy R, a tidy function always has the first argument is the data frame, and it always returns the complete data frame. And the effect of that is that you can put these chains in place, because what's going on is that we put LGA into select, but then select, because it's tidy, returns LGA or the data frame, but only with these variables, and then it puts it into drop NA, which always, because it's tidy, returns the LGA but without the NAs, and then puts it into here. Are you following now? No. Yes? Okay, you'll get it. The last thing no.
Well, when you say returns, you mean it returns to the...
Return.
You've modified it.
Return. So here, I'll do an example of returns. Okay, so that's the classic way to write it, yes? Now we'll put it into variable x, y, z. Now dplyr select will now return into x, y, the variable x, y, z. It will create a data frame which will appear up here with just 3 variables in it. Yeah? So you go Control Enter. That is what the contents of that were returned to that variable. That's what return means. And if we look at it, it's a data frame. Yeah. So the point is that tidy functions always return a data frame. Yeah, and the data frame that it was given as the first function. So in a sense, you could say that this is sort of a chain. It's always, this is LGA1, and then this becomes the next one, LGA2. And it always does that. It just makes little modifications to it, but it's always constantly taking as the first function and returning, taking as the first function and returning. And that makes it much simpler to be able to write the code then. So you can see here, it just knows this is going into the first thing here, and then whatever this returns goes into the first thing here, wherever returns goes, etc. Yes? Now we're getting, are we?
So this is a good way to make a new data set.
It is, exactly. It becomes a really beautiful, clean way to... It is, yeah, that's right. And that's why this is a new way of doing ARM in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's just brilliant. It really is. It just makes it a lot easier. Once you understand it and you get what's going on, it's really nice. Green or any red or orange?
I think orange, but I think I've got to go play with it.
Okay, yeah, I've got to go play with it. All right, so I'm just going to now add a complication in. I know. Wrinkles on top of wrinkles. This is not a tidy function, LM. If LM has the format that you put the equation in variables, and then you put comma, data equals the name of your data set, which is the way, because it was built a long time ago, and whatever. So tidy's got a way of dealing with that, or the piping has got to do with dealing with that, is that if you want to pipe this, if you want to pipe what's going in somewhere else, you just put a dot, a full stop. And so this now says, actually don't dump it at the front of this because LM will get really confused. Instead, dump it the data set here, and then do what you wanted to do with it. Which is pretty bloody smart, really. Do we get that? We'll see. So I'll just run it, and you can play with it as well. You've got the code there. So I'm going to run this, and so this is going to tell us how much does 1 unit of Gini change. 1 unit of Gini coefficient. How many robberies does it create? 1 unit of unemployment. How many robberies does it create per 100,000 people in a local government area? Yep. Error. Oh, I didn't put. What? Can anyone spot the error? What's the error in that code? Pipe. I missed a pipe. There's a pipe missing. Boom. Okay, so what the hell does this mean? It looks all messy, but actually, remember the rule is look for statistical significance. Well, that's the p-value there. Of course it is because of that strange number. But yeah.
For you try to change the names, like changing Gini into actual words like Gini index. So which
can I?
Yeah, where should we put the main change? Just in the old way.
Yeah,
we have been.
I don't know why I've got to say, I don't know why the labels have not appeared. But can we not worry about that for the moment? I promise to work it out, but it's not. I'm not sure. It may be the version of LGA that I'm using, but I don't think it is. Huh? What's wrong?
Previously there is.
Yeah, go.
Previously there is a method to see. A function called C to kind of recode all the names.
Yeah, no, we're not going to go there. That's a completely separate issue. It's a really completely separate issue. So Gini, income, and unemployment, right? So what this says, you look over here, this is the significance.
Yeah.
So it says that actually Gini of income is not significant, not less than p.05.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
You see that? Yep. Yes. And this one is significant. So who wants to interpret that? So when we go over to the coefficient, and it says, for 1 unit increase in unemployment, there is basically 5 units increase in robberies in an LGA on average per 100,000 people.
Yep.
And it's got an R-squared of about 0.08. We learned about R-squareds last week a bit with correlation. Well, these have R-squared, that's for the whole model. So it turns out unemployment explains about 10% of robberies. It's kind of cool.
Shouldn't you want to rob the rich areas so you get close up?
Well, funny you should say that because that's what we're going to do next. I'm not kidding. It's hilarious. Look at this.
Where did you pull the 10% from?
Multiple R squared. Oh, I mean, it's actually, you should use the adjusted R squared, so it's 6%. Yeah. Okay, it's 6%. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, impressive.
So,
So I've just got a question.
yes.
I also ask, should we use S in numeric functions in this?
Yes, it should be. You could use as, but you can also use functions like as factor to deal with if you've got something that is if you've got something that is a list of names, like say male and female, you can do as factor, and it will transform it into a numeric variable and create labels for it.
So I put it after the select function.
Yeah, oh, yes, you could. Well, no, actually. Well, you would put it in here, actually. You would do something, well, don't do this, but you would do something like this. I think it's as factor. I've got to double check, but I think it's as factor. Like that. Yep. I think that's it. Or the other one would be to simply go and do it earlier on. Probably what's better to do, actually, I changed my mind. I think what you would do is do something like LGA gender is equal to as factor LGA gender. Not that there is a gender, but yeah.
So after you run with as factors, you don't have this step.
No, it stops. It's like it's changed the data. It's sort of like specifying, as factor is like specifying this is a categorical variable. Yeah. So let's go through. So let's just now change this a little bit. So the code for this is on there before, already on there. So we're going to get the mean unemployment. Boom. And then we're going to look at what happens in poor areas and rich areas. Or not poor, but high unemployment and low unemployment. So we're going to go use this thing called a filter. So we've got it here, tidy, drop NA, and then we're going to filter it. So this says only give me places where unemployment, actually will make it below the mean unemployment, sorry. So that means these are more well-off, more economically developed areas, correct? Actually, no, I'm going to do it for low, sorry. So high unemployment areas first. Everyone follow? So we're basically only getting half the data set to analyze here, but we'll see what happens. And, unemployment. It turns out, oh yeah, that's right. I was wrong. I got it around the wrong way. It turns out that when unemployment is above the median unemployment, then it's mostly the Gini coefficient that is driving things. Yes. I was... Why?
What's the data? When I run this, numbers are different from yours.
Yeah, mine too.
What have I done? Did you put, when you did mean unemployment, did you get NARM?
What is your p-value? Job? Okay, the one that you want. The p-value that I don't want is 0.0169.
I'm not sure. We're not. Did you get different ones to the what's on the website?
No, actually,
No, it is looking at.
no, give me the one that is in the website.
Mean unemployment, mean greater than mean. So in high unemployment areas, I've got a different number here. What did I do wrong?
Because you are using the one that is below. You have to use the one that is up. Yeah.
Huh?
You'll
use
sexual offenses, not robbery.
Oh. That's what happened. I changed it because it was more interesting to do robbery than sexual offences. That was the issue. Okay, fair enough. My fault. We're doing robbery, yeah. So if we all do robbery, does it work?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Sorry. There you go. Typo. We've all made those, haven't we? Okay, and then you can do the same thing here. So you could actually change it and look at what happens in when unemployment is less than the mean unemployment. So this is low unemployment areas. Actually, unemployment drives it, not Gini coefficient. I don't know why, but you could come up with some elaborate theory.
You need to stick money.
Huh? Yes?
Gini, this should be from 0 to 1.
Yes.
But how can it be 43?
So what this is that this is quite an inflate of 43. This is if you went from 0 to 1, which you don't. Our range actually only goes from, let's say, 0.3 to 0.6.
So this 43 is robbery.
It's 43 theoretically, if you went from 0 to 1 in Gini coefficient, you would go up by 40, or go down by 43 logarithms. Yep. And I think I'm just trying to teach you some of these. We good?
Yep.
Good. Useful? All right, let's move on to the actual substance of today. There's lots more of that to learn, and I just want you to, at this stage, know that it's there. So, let's go on to 6.1, which is factor analysis. Okay, so there's code to set up your computer. You can run that in your own time. I've got multiple data sets we're going to play with at different times and code books again. But let's just get into the substance of this. So what is dimension reduction? The whole focus this week is on the idea that that we often measure a hell of a lot of variables, but really many of them represent pretty much exactly the same thing. And we want to be able to sort of reduce those down. One of the simple ways we do that is take an index. So for example, with we've got like the study of the euro and attitudes towards the euro, and that we have maybe 10 different questions. Is that right, Melina? Yeah, so 10 questions about attitudes towards the euro. They ask different questions about how sad you would be if the euro ended and how happy you are when it formed or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It turns out that these all tap into an what we call an underlying dimension called pro and or anti-EU sentiment, right? I've given an example here where we have, say, a single theoretical concept called social class, but we might measure it by multiple different mechanisms. We might have household income in dollars per year, ownership of a home, yes or no, ownership of shares or property, yes or no, occupation, status, maybe high, medium, and low, and education, years of education. Now, if we ran a correlation of these 5 variables, what do you think we'd find? They're highly correlated, and they really are. They probably have a correlation of between 0.2 and 0.6. Yes? Yep. Now, one of the ways of interpreting the fact that there's that high correlation is to say that really there is this underlying variable there called wealth. And these are all tapping into different aspects of it. Now, they don't all capture all of it, and none of them are perfect, but there is this underlying dimension, which we can't ever see, but what we're going to learn about is that we can detect it, and we can sort of reconstruct it, and it turns out to be very powerful. So, dimension reduction is a set of analytical methods, things like factor analysis, multidimensional scaling, cluster analysis. We're not going to learn all of those, we're going to just learn one of them, or 2 of them today, which help us to identify those dimensions. The funny thing is, I think one of the things to think about, and you'll realize this as we do it, it's an incredibly intuitive concept, even though at various points you'll just throw your hands up in the air and go, this is crazy, right? We actually do factor analysis every day. We don't even need to think. We don't even need to try, and we do factor analysis. When we draw stereotypes, when we say, you know, poor people are a certain way, wealthy people are a certain way, Chinese people are a certain way, Australians are a certain way, whatever we are, Serbians are a certain way. We are often drawing stereotypes, and even if they're not stereotypes, even if they're very well considered, thought through, you know, based on our experiences, and we're not racist, etc., we're still doing a form of qualitative dimension reduction. Why? Because we're talking about how there is this underlying notion of Serbianness, and it drives certain cultural traits that you get. Yes? Are we all good? Now, in quantitative analysis, we use slightly more sophisticated methods, and it turns out actually that this method is able to be applied in many different ways. It allows you to say what are different dimensions, like we've talked about, but you can also say what are the different types of something. You could say also what are some clusters. So like maybe clusters of either people or clusters of variables that go together. And the big thing that ends up happening when we do this is we get a smaller set of variables. So we're going to show that we can reduce, actually we can say very convincingly that we have, I think 24 different crimes, but doing a factor analysis says really there are just 3 dimensions there. Right, and we can show the math, we can show that we're going to see the results of that. There are broadly 3 patterns of crimes that are taking place. Now, the exact mathematics behind it are a bit beyond the scope of this, way beyond the scope of this class. And I did this today for you because I know many of you are going to say, I really want to understand the underlying maths. So I got 6 of the best and simplest videos on explaining what's called eigenvectors and eigendecomposition, which are the basis of factor analysis. They're done by brilliant teachers who are better than me at some level, and they are really unless you like, and they actually this one here is particularly good because it says, look, none of this is that hard. You just have to have mastered these 4 or 5 basic concepts of linear algebra. And once you've got those, then you can just put them together and you can do factor analysis. And then they go through and do like a factor analysis of a 2x2 matrix. The point is, you'll look at these and your brain will, unless you're good at linear algebra, your brain will you'll feel stupid, basically. However, I think by the end of today, you're going to feel really comfortable using factor analysis because it works. And you'll see that it works, and it's intuitive, and it relates to real problems that you have. Yep. And ones that you can understand. And that's what's going to happen, as I've sort of explained to you before. There's a level at which we understand some of these things by metaphor, by analogy, or by a level of trust in the fact that lots of scientists have come before us or academics who've tested it. So before we go on, I'm just going to hit you with some key terminology. You're not going to remember this, but let it flow over you, and then we'll get to it. So we have a factor. A factor is that variable that's latent, not measured, or not unobserved, but which we can measure, and it captures the variation across multiple observed variables. Yep, so it's a factor. Factor loadings, you can think of as just the correlation between each of the different items and that factor. So maybe household, your income correlates 0.5 with the underlying variable wealth, right? And maybe home ownership correlates at 0.3. Those numbers, 0.5, 0.3, etc., are examples of factor loading.
So is your underlying variable, as you say, it's just intuitive?
Well, it's not intuitive, it's calculated. People do this amazing maths to work it out. It's real, and it's calculated, and it's verifiable. We can show it's really there, but the way we end up describing it and relating to it is by talking about the correlation with multiple things. Yep. And this is the method. It's called eigendecomposition or spectral decomposition that generates eigenvalues and eigenvectors. You don't really need to understand it, and I don't want to. Yeah, but you can go into that in your own time. And the other thing is we can generate what's often you'll hear is a factor score. So I think, Melania, in your article they have factor scores. And what this simply means is that if you took, say, wealth was equal to, it's like a linear regression actually, what ends up happening. The factor score, say you go, I don't know, my wealth score is going to be my income times 0.5, my home ownership times 0.3, etc., etc. They all add up to a factor score that each individual can have for wealth. Yeah, and so it ends up being a way of reconstructing that underlying variable from the real variables in your data set. And the big thing about this, just to cut to where we're going with this, we did that regression before, right? And it was really nice when there were only 3 variables. We could think about it, right? But many surveys have got hundreds of questions. And that the hundreds of questions is wasteful of basically data. We can't, the more variables we put in, the less power we have in our data set, because it's sort of like it basically chews up information. And it also is just harder to think about. So one of the real purposes of dimension reduction is to say, I'll give an example, like, to say, we might say, what drives you to vote for the Labor Party or the Liberal Party? And we might say, rather than say it's your answer to 10 different questions about what you think about taxes and welfare and healthcare and everything, you say, what's your position on economic conservatism to, economic progressivism or something like that? Yeah? You just bring all those 10 variables together. Yes?
Right, so in the article I'm replicating, they calculated stress multiplied by, say, reagents attendance. Is this an example of factor analysis?
No, it's not quite. I don't even know whether there is in yours. Oh, the factor analysis in yours. So this is the one. This is the study that is on acceptability of suicide, and they had 4 or 5 questions in there about suicide acceptability, didn't they?
Yeah.
Right? You would do a factor analysis to show that those 4 move together and reflect some underlying variable.
Calculating the index.
Yeah, so that index you've created, but you would use factor analysis is one of the ways that you would test that those are all moving together, and to show how much each of them is loading on that underlying variable, which is acceptability of suicide. Yep. And also maybe to say, is there multiple things going on? Because maybe one of them is sort of like moral and one of them is, do I want to kill myself, right? And so maybe some of the questions load on one of those items and some of the questions load on the sort of the ethical religious aspect. Yep, so maybe there are 2 dimensions. Okay, so steps in factor analysis. So, and this, bear with me, we're about to run some code, so it's going to be fun. So the first thing we do is we say, how many factors should we extract? Because it's a reasonable question. Like, I've got 24 crimes. Are there 24 different dimensions? Is there one dimension? Is there just criminality? What's going on? Well, there are 3 methods that are used. I'm just going to tell you them so that you've been introduced to them. You're not necessarily going to understand them, but there is the number of factors these are different methods, right? So it turns out that if you talk to different experts and if you go over the years, over the decades, people have used different measures, but one of them is a number of factors whose eigenvalues, which is one part of the process, are greater than 0. So it basically means those that have a big effect, basically. The number of factors whose eigenvalues above a point of inflection, you will see that it's a weird thing in a scree plot, but there's like an elbow in it, we'll see. Or you can say the number of factors whose eigenvalues values are above a simulated data set that has no factors. Whatever, basically this is seen to be the better one, but it often generates a lot. We'll have a look at it, and I'll just show you what it looks like when we run it.
That's not a null.
This is like a simulated data set with no factors is kind of like, what happens if we put white noise in here? How many factors do we think we get? Right, and the idea is that if you get more factors than white noise, then yeah. Well, you should be getting less factors than white noise. So this is the function. It simply says FA parallel. We could run it, but I'm just going to show you the result of it first. So it generates this thing called a scree plot, which looks weird. That line there is what is 1. So that's that first method that used to be the rule. This second one is different visual simulated data sets. Turns out it's not that different. And in fact, underneath this little plot, it says parallel analysis suggests factors 3. That's it. And we didn't calculate number of components. So great. We've got it. We now know we're supposed to look for 3 factors in this when we run the analysis. Good? Fine. Yeah, I know. You're like, whatever. I don't understand. We then... Huh? Pardon?
I said if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I know. What the main point here is this is a quite a complex... I don't want to overstate it, but it's a way of working out. For us as social scientists, the key thing is if you were to grab a data set, whatever yours is, say you took all of the attitudes towards many different issues across Macquarie University, you could run it through this and it would tell you there are really 3 main ways that these questions cluster. Huh?
I'll do that with my docs.
Yeah, it's interesting. It really is. It's really interesting. You can do it with your whole data set if you want. I mean, it's got to have some reason for doing it, but you can do it with any data. Doesn't mean it means anything. Okay, so then you have to choose a factoring method. Again, way beyond us, but there are these different methods: maximum likelihood, ordinary least squares, exact extra, etc. Often people pick maximum likelihood or principal axis, so we've picked principal axis. You then have, which is, again, this is introducing a lot early on, but if you imagine that the way we kind of think about this is that there are these questions that are measuring more or less the same things, and we're trying to find a kind of lines of best fit that explain the multiple different dimensions of that. We can really ask it in 2 sort of ways. One is what we call orthogonal. We can make the data so that the different dimensions have got no correlation with each other. What does that mean? I think we're gonna. I'm gonna show it to you later. But if I could, okay, I'll do an example. Yeah, let me show you an orthogonal rotation. Like orthogonal might be a dimensionality like economic, progressive to economic conservative, and then social, progressive, and social conservative, right? So down here we have people who, religion, no sex before marriage, free markets, etc., etc. Up here we have people who are like taxation, care for people, look after the poor, but get married, right? And maybe don't let women have abortions. Up here we have You're classic leftist, and down here we have kind of like Malcolm Turnbull or something like that, right? Broadly socially progressive, or the wet liberals. You following me? Now, if we imagine, now I don't think it's actually true in this case, that there was no relationship between these two variables, right? That in a sense, if you plotted people, they were all spread out all over it. There was no correlation between them. Then that would make a reasonable orthogonal, make for a reasonable assumption of orthogonality of the dimensions. Are you following me? We good? Yes? Yes? No. Oh. What do you? No, we're not going to. What's the rule in the military? No one gets left behind. So what's wrong?
Okay. How's that related to the parallel analysis between plots?
The parallel analysis in this case, told us that, our hypothetical, that there were two dimensions to our data. So we asked all Australians 20 questions about their attitude towards abortion and gay marriage and, taxation and helping Aboriginal people and providing money for welfare and healthcare and education and privatisation. And we ran it through the scree plot, or we ran it through the parallel analysis, and it said two variables, two dimensions explain all these 20. Yes?
Okay, so these steps are steps.
These are literally steps, right? It said two. And then, we end up having to just pick one of these, and there are different reasons. The main one is whether you think the variables. Let me give you another example, because I think this will make sense. Imagine you had two dimensions. One was called wealth. Sorry. Thank you. One was called wealth, and the other one was called, I'm just drawing it like this, education. Right, so we had a whole lot of data measuring different measures of education, IQ tests, years of education, what scores you got on your final exams, etc. Apparently, whatever. And you had another one which is sort of measures of income and wealth and all this sort of stuff. And you did an analysis, you did the plot, and it said 2, right? And you said, okay, now you could say these are completely independent variables. There is no correlation between them. But it's not true, right? We know that wealth helps education, education helps generate wealth. These things are actually highly correlated. So the way that it may be better to think about modelling these two dimensions is like this. So it's sort of like thinking that they're actually correlated. And it is. If you look in your data set, just do a correlation of education, well, the correlation is probably about 0.4, right? And so we have these two dimensions, education and wealth, and they're sort of seen as dimensions, but they're not. This is just conceptual, but they are better thought of as correlated with each other. Yeah, it's sort of like you're going to have to force it to find a dimension through there, but do you force it to have a cross, or do you let them wiggle when they're trying to find the best lines of best fit? Are we following?
But how do you interpret the scree clause? What does it mean?
So I'll go up. Sorry, you're stuck on the scree plot. Okay, this has got nothing to do with the scree plot, except the scree plot told us 1 or 2 dimensions or 5 or whatever. The main way you interpret the scree plot is you read this. Right, the 3. But the way that it says it, way it works it out, is it says where does the FA simulated data line run through, and just whatever the thing is, the triangle is before that, it must run just before the 4th one, so it's 3. What?
So that means there are three factors.
There are three factors in our data set that is which we're analyzing, which is the data set of crimes.
But we don't know which three.
We got no idea. We do it step by step.
Okay.
Because what we're doing here is we're setting up the model, right? So it said there are two dimensions. Paul's like, why the hell did I sign up for this? I was like, I knew I signed up for a reason, but I'm really annoyed at this point. I want it to be hard, and then I don't want it to be hard. Yeah. Once you see the other, let's keep pushing on. I think we need to push on.
Gotta say all the steps.
Okay, so we choose a method. Whatever, it's like saying Pearson's or Spearman's or whatever, right? Or linear regression or logistic regression, whatever, just to what the experts tell you. Rotation is basically just, should we assume that they are orthogonal, the dimensions, or do they correlate with each other? And then we name them, there's different names, but the main ones, if it's orthogonal, we'll use Varimax, and if it's oblique, we'll use Promax. Whatever their names, that other people's job to work them out. And then we run the analysis. So I'm actually going to skip past this, and because we're going to analyze this in a second. I'm going to look at this, and we can look at it as a diagram.
So does that produce that?
That is, yeah, R produces this.
This is the three dimensions with all the variables.
So this is the three dimensions. I know, it's fantastic. Exactly, that's exactly the right.
And so those are the variables that influence the
So I can
this is the correlation between first dimension. This is actually the second dimension because but even though it's called 3, it was found third, but then they rotated and it became the second most important. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
And these two dimensions are correlated by 0.6. So there's a huge correlation between these two dimensions. And then there's this third dimension off here. Transport, receiving stolen goods, stealing from stores, stealing from persons, and fraud. I don't know. Yep.
So the fraud is correlated by 0.9 to the third dimension.
Yes.
Yep. Why it doesn't work on my data set? So it's the arrow in or X.
Huh?
Like X must be inverted.
Yeah. There's a few different things. Can I deal with the? Did you run this data or did you run your own data set? I'll answer questions at this stage if you don't mind about people running the model datas. Yeah, I can't answer.
But I can't really. So what does this mean? So what are PA 1, 2, 3 and so?
Actually, I'll give you. Let me skip to the second example. Okay. So let me skip. Yeah, maybe I can.
Let's just say what is independent and dependent variables?
There is not. No. So this is not about independent and dependent variables. This is about clustering things that go together. It is like saying, what sort of clothes and apparel do women wear, and what sort of clothes and apparel do men wear? You know, long hair tends to go with wearing makeup and wearing dresses. It's not absolutely correlated. The women here are in pants, you know. But these are the sorts of things, right? And this is saying which of these, all these are correlated with one another, and which are not. Right? Now we don't know why they're correlated. We actually have to use theory and thinking about it, right? Yes?
So how you do to put it together to permit that? You do first, you have like use an index, and then you do run the factor, or you...
No, you run the factor, you get this.
Yeah.
You run the factor, and so you sort of say, how many dimensions are there? And it says 3. You pick a couple of methods, which really doesn't matter, and then you just run it. So you literally just run it on the data.
Who decides which dimension?
The computer.
The computer just decides, oh, right.
This is not the right.
Yeah, you have no power, which is actually good because it's objective, right?
No, I just think you know a favor because basically what they did is they actually choose different dimensions, but they choose it.
but they chose it using this, which is not choosing, it is analysing. It's like saying you don't choose the coefficients in your regression or your correlation. I mean, you do have some level of choice because you can choose different, like whether it's 3 or 5 or 7, and you can choose the different methods, and it changes if you drop some of these variables out and say they don't really make sense. Yes?
So where would you get the 3 from? Do you just
That came from that first thing.
First step.
The first step,
discrete?
screen plot.
So this 3 corresponds with the 3 in
Screen plot.
the plot.
Yes.
Okay, so that means there are 3, say 3 connections.
You could think of it, you know what you could think about? Can I draw it here?
So for example, I have a data set with 50 questions. And these 50 questions, so I start to run factor analysis for that 50 questions. And they choose which dimensions are there.
Well, I think the
Can I do an analogy for you?
But PA 1, 2, and 3 don't have names yet because we don't know what they are.
We don't know what they are, but that's the end of the
So that's
analysis.
the end of it. But you know, yeah, and then you need your theory and you need to try and identify what they are.
But we kind of so say to you,
Numbers.
imagine, one of the ways to think about factor analysis is to say, you have to describe these dots with 3 lines. No, with lines. And you got to go, well, how many freaking lines do I get? Well, the scree plot tells you how many lines you get. And then you say, well, how do I fit the lines best? Well, you actually do, they use ordinal least squares, which is the same method. They literally just try and find a line, 3 lines that go through this and reduce the distance between all of the lines and the axes. Does that make sense? So that's what it's doing. I mean, it's doing it across 24-dimensional space or whatever, but which sounds weird. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go.
So precisely in this case, just say marijuana has no correlation with sex of, let's say.
Well, sort of. It's not the correlation between this is excluding a whole lot of, this is not showing all of the relationships here. This has simplified it down. So this particular visualization is it's called a simple visualization. So it's only showing the correlations with their first, the most important factor. And so long as it's above 0.3, and it's excluded. So this is a gross simplification. For what kind of say, what it's got here, right? Liquor offences, offensive conduct, marijuana, other theft, and resisting officer, right? This is people getting drunk in the centre of Sydney, right, at nightclubs, and young people getting busted with drugs, right? Sniffer drugs, strip search and stuff like that. Here, fraud, steal from person, steal from store, receive stolen goods, transport. I think this is poor area, probably poor areas, I don't know. And then here we have a whole series that just go together: broken into dwellings, damaged property, motor vehicle theft. They look, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why these go together, I have to tell you. But you need to go and analyse. You'd have to go and look at them and try and understand them. Yeah.
This is somehow related to the matrix, the covariate.
Yeah, okay, another way to put all of this, remember we saw that correlation matrix and there were patterns in it? This is finding the patterns. So maybe that's the way I should express it, just to go back to that. So if I can go back to let's put this here. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I try my very best, but let me just get let me just show you this. Let's look at these two together, because literally that's what it does. It takes the correlation matrix.
Yeah, that's the reason why I try to use my data sets.
Yeah, because you understand that. So if we go.
So,
Wait. Let's just on.
do people actually publish articles based on factor analysis?
Huge!
I'd love to see that.
It's tons of them. So if we look here,
How is it going to get anyone to understand?
Yeah,
no, but can we just look at this? So this is a rough thing where they just sorted on the first column, which is assault, domestic violence. What you can see here is a dark area, which presumably these ones will most be in the top corner there. We do down here have transport, fraud, steal from persons, liquor offences are here as well, so other theft. But we can see that these are not very correlated with these ones over here.
So in that case, other theft should be related to marijuana.
So whereas other theft, yeah, 0.8 with steal from persons, 0.6 from liquor offences, steal from stores, marijuana. Come on, marijuana, where is marijuana? Marijuana doesn't seem to be there. Cannabis, maybe it's, oh yeah, possession of cannabis, there it is. And what do we want?
Other theft and
Possession of cannabis with other theft, 0.6, I think. So this is a way, I guess one of the ways to put this, if I can be simple about it, with factor analysis, you can describe this. If you pulled out enough factors, you could actually completely reconstruct it. If you go beyond just the ones that, but it's basically saying, if I wanted to block this off and put it into groups, what's the best way to do it? Yep.
But I cannot decide how to. The computer does.
How?
They group it.
How do they do it?
No, they do it. The computer.
Yeah, you don't.
I cannot do it.
No, but that's fine. But honestly, you can go and watch the videos that I've given, and watch someone explain it really simply for 13 minutes, and at some point your brain just breaks. I mean, I'm not trying to be silly about it. I mean, you could do it actually, but it's just like, at some level, it's also not worth it, because even they say, look, we can do these equations for 2. But this is 24 by 24. They said it becomes hard to do by hand when you get to 3 by 3. Right? So even mathematicians don't. What you need to understand is the underlying principle, which actually you can understand, which is that if I have all these dots, how do I put a few rods through it and capture most of the information? And that's it. Because actually that's what ends up happening. What we end up doing is we end up pulling these out and just adding them all together and getting a variable for this factor and then a variable for this factor and a variable for that factor, and they work just like an index, like the ones that you really do understand, right?
Exactly, but it's not the way that I am doing, for example, in my paper. It's different.
Yes, you just add together some ones that you know are real.
Choose that one and produce an index and then it's a variable.
But what you could do is you could take your Euro questions and do a factor analysis of it. And ask, is this best described by 1 dimension or 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions? And you could, and you know what, you could argue with the paper. You could say to the people who wrote the paper, you call it 1 thing, it's really 2. And the computer says so, right?
Yeah.
Good? Yeah, you could do that too, exactly. Okay, are we good?
Yeah.
Happy? Greens, I want green stickies up or red stickies.
I'm sort of a little intrigued that it can't actually tell you what they are.
But that's because it's correlation.
It is correlation.
So what you end up having to do is so there's actually there's almost like you go and use qualitative methods to name them. What you do is you go to a whole lot of experts and you say, this is what I got. What is it? What name would you give this? It's interesting. I've done this for relationships. So I've got so my area of research is social networks, and particularly what's called negative ties, so conflict. Turns out, and no one's ever done a dimension reduction on positive and negative ties, right? Which it's like this technique's nearly existed for 50 years. But so what we did was we got onto Mechanical Turk. Would you know what Mechanical Turk is? It's like, Qualtrics. You've used, it's basically just a whole lot of, like, 100,000 Americans sitting in their rooms doing surveys for like $2 for every 10 minutes, or $1 for every 10 minutes of surveys, right? All over. It's potentially and probably is grossly exploitative. We paid them quite well. But anyway, long story short, we did a 10-minute survey where we asked people, they got 6 out of 24 different questions about like who do you confide in, who do you admire, who do you socialize with, who can help you when you're sick, who do you hate, who do you dislike, who do you avoid, all these sorts of questions. And we got them to just name people in their lives. And from that, we'd get about 25 people per person, and then we'd have which ties those 25 people got. Does that make sense? And then from that, we could construct the correlation matrix. So actually, the factor analysis is done on this correlation matrix. It takes all your data, reduces it to the correlation matrix, and then it does the factor analysis on this. So we constructed a factor analysis, I can show you if you want, of the 24, like 12 positive and 12 negative, and then we did a factor analysis of it. And we found, do you want to know what the dimensions were? Can I tell you? The 3 dimensions we found, I think they're pretty amazing. The 3 dimensions we found for for positive ties, we found that you had people you socialized with, you had people who you kind of admired and looked up to, and they tend to include parents and stuff. The people you could turn to for help, and they had people who you sort of turn to for advice. So these are the 4 different types of like positive ties. And there were 3 different types of negative ties, and they were people you avoid, people you have conflict with, like an arguments with, and people you have basically contempt for, you can really visceral dislike. And it turns out that actually people have a lot of conflict with the people that are actually really important in their lives. So they have conflict with spouses and partners, but they don't tend to have contempt and avoidance. Which, anyway, whatever. That was what we did. Does that make sense? Useful? Can we play with R now? Okay, yes, you can. Sorry, I'm sending you to sleep. Okay. So let's go back. Okay, so let's look at, can we just go through and we're going to quickly look at, do you want to, so these are what the results look like. We looked at the table, which looks pretty. I'm just going to show you these very quickly. What we have here is the loading, which is, and this is not, once it's rotated, it's not really a true correlation, but whatever, close enough. You can think of it as a correlation. So this is the correlation between factor 1 and assault, domestic violence. Doesn't load on the other 2, but it does load on the first one. And you can see basically here the loading for each of these variables. Do you get it? Yes? 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 We good? Should we move? Let's move on to another example, which might be a bit, we visualize the factors. Let's go to the next one, which is a slightly different example. What time is it? Do you want to take a break? It's past. Yes? Okay. The next one's quite fun. Huh? What did you say? The next one we've got is attitudes towards politics.
In my case, it says one dimension is actually married and never married. I think this too as having very strong correlations with this images, right?
Exactly, it is. That's why factor analysis needs to be informed by theory.
All right.
So
this one should be meaningful. on age, education.
Yeah, so the younger you are, the more educated you are. And the younger you are,
income.
So higher education and higher income.
Yeah.
The higher education is related to lower age and lower marital status. R2? Is that
R2, I think it's divorce.
Yeah, because basically young people max out their own university. I don't know, I'm guessing.
Yes, higher educated, younger, and less divorce.
The thing is that, I mean,
but I did notice from the matrix that there's a strong correlation between age and education in the case of Korea. So this one should be meaningful, but this one definitely not. Right?
Yeah, no, that's not. And I mean, it's yes. In this case, it's just fun to look a way to play with it. Try with the different suicide ones. The 4 suicide questions.
Try that. Like before
before you combine them. That's a really interesting one. Because, I mean, unless you've got, are there any other attitude data in there as well?
Yes. Everybody has a likelihood.
Wow, you've got 14 questions.
Yeah.
That's great. That's exactly what you want for a factor analysis.
Yeah, but I need to recode them.
No, you don't need to recode them. I mean, you just got to get rid of that 8. You don't actually need to. You don't even need. It'll do the reverse coding for you as well. Definitely. This will probably show you why they picked the ones they did. So apparently Australian Unity has dropped nearly 100% of its patients in rural areas with high needs. Would you do this?
No.
And 70% of their patients with high needs in city areas.
Across Australia?
They're apparently doing it to make it, well, the theory is that they're doing it. Gotta have to, One thing to say about this is that you don't use this to describe the whole data set. You use this to describe domains or parts of it. So if you look here, I didn't do this on the whole. I didn't do this on the whole data set. I did it on all the crimes.
Oh, so even the street line stuff, it's not the whole data set.
No.
Okay.
It's not the Gini coefficients, it's not the unemployment rate, it's not all those things I've left out. I haven't done it. You tend to pick things that are theoretically meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So before you just select all those variables into crime.
Yeah, so that's what I did. So you probably, I think you can see it. So yeah, that's right. I selected it all into crimes. So up here, I said take the LGA and then pull out just all of those between assault, domestic violence, and transport and make that crimes. So all the analysis is on that, but I haven't done anything else. Yeah?
Yep. No, that's it.
How
How many unique things, how many variables makes this work better in a sense, like, you get
yeah, there is what is it?
So say my data set is only 4 or 5 variables that I'm interested in that have a connection or may have a connection.
Yeah, you can use a few different types of analysis. That we're going to learn one other one that's a little bit more appropriate to small ones, and it's just do they make a good index or not?
This is good for lots of variables.
Well, it's still, you can use it. You could use it on 6 or 5. I don't know whether it would work or not. It might.
Is there a quick way to drop all the A's, to record all the A's into the whole data set?
The 8s?
Like getting rid of
Yeah, I don't know. I get what you're saying.
and then just before recording, just show some interesting pattern.
But what does it mean?
Obviously, the 6 variables chosen in the article are some correlations.
Are they in the main one factor, or are they across the factors?
3 of them in one dimension, 3 in another dimension, because they're reverse coded, I assume. So these 2 dimensions, they have minus 0.4 of the number again. So, and there's another dimension having no correlation with other 2 dimensions, and among those variables that are chosen.
Interesting. Do you think I should just restart? I think we're going to run out of time. Is that all right? Oh, well. Oh. You can catch up on YouTube. So, let's go through. What is this? Yeah. So, this is what the results look like. So, to run factor analysis, we did that beautiful. You run this sort of a command here. So, this. Oh, actually, let me go. Let's go back. Sorry. This one here, we are now analyzing attitudes. So what I've done here is I've pulled out, we'll go back actually. So I've got AES full, this one, which you can do, and then we can take a look at what we've constructed. So just copy that into your R code, and we'll run it together. You don't need, well, we actually will run browse URL. So let's import the data set, then let's run the code book, and that will open separately. So this is an incredible code book. It's like miles long. And we're just analyzing a few of these variables. I think it's the Australian electoral study from 2013. This simply pulls out a set of the variables, first to last. This is just I probably shouldn't use this given what Young's taught us about how to use select, but this is the variable. This is the way I was doing it last time. It's just sort of saying pull out all the variables between a certain point and a certain point. The main thing is if you do this, and then you go and take a look at what's in attitudes. Oh, where's attitudes? Yeah, double click on attitudes up here, view attitudes. You can see that this is importance of taxation, this is the importance of immigration, this is the importance of education, the importance of the environment, industrial relations. I think this is in determining your vote. Refugees and asylum seekers, global warming, carbon tax, management of the economy, death penalty reintroduced for murder, decriminalize marijuana, stiffer sentences for those who break the law, women should be given preferential, or maybe they're given too much preferential treatment, turn back the boats, same-sex marriage should be prohibited by law, white Australians get advantages in applying for jobs, people think of themselves as members of ethnic groups rather than, I think, a nation, and we should increase the business opportunities for women. Yep. Now we can go and have a quick look. They're the questions that they've got within that data set that are sort of real political attitudes ones. And what we are going to ask now is, do these form different dimensions? So we can. So what we do to run the analysis, first we work through the FA parallel, and this is going to prove actually the point that we just discovered, that actually, even though I told you the best method was to use that third method on the scree plot, sometimes it generates way too many dimensions. So let's just run this, and we should see it open up down here in the plots. And I will hit zoom and open it up. So if we use the first method, the one that people used to use, you would say there were two dimensions. If you use the elbow, you would say the elbow turns about there, so you would use 2 or 3 factors. If you use this new really advanced funky method that says how does it compare to a random data set, you would pick, I think it's 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 variables. 7, right? Which, well, I don't know. There's clearly a lot of declining returns there. And this is where it ends up being, I chose factors rather than the computer chose them for me, because you use a bit of judgment. So we've done that. Let's go and then we just run the analysis, which is this here, one line, and then what we do is we put it into a thing called results 1, or whatever we want to call it, because then it's easier to use for all the other things we do, like the plotting. Let's just make it. Again, what have we done here? Attitudes is the data set. Factors is 7. Promax, which is Promax, which is an orthogonal rotation, so they can the factors can relate to each other, and we're using a factor method called principal axis. But honestly, whatever. Let's run it, and then we can just take a look at it. Now this is where it's going to look a bit messy, but this is actually some of the interesting bits. So I'm going to make some space. Okay, so that's the command we ran, the call. It says, warning, a Hayward case detected. I think a Hayward case is when the rotation makes one of these go more than 1. There it is. Global somehow loads more than 1, which is like having a correlation coefficient of more than 1, which apparently bad. Honestly, doesn't bother us at this stage. We can see here that the PA2 is the first dimension worth the most. We can see that tax is correlating with it, almost loading on it almost 0. Boom, boom, boom. Death penalty. Bring back the death penalty, please. And lock lawbreakers up. And stop the boats. And people act more like an ethnic, not like a ethnicity, not like a society. Yep. That's the first dimension. These ones go together. At some level, it's kind of like, no shit, Sherlock. You know, what name would you give that dimension? Maybe punitive. There's sort of a law and order aspect to it. And then there's also the ethnicity. It's sort of like law and order and nationalism. Yep. Good?
One nation vote.
One nation vote. Yeah, exactly. That's a bit of a one nation vote. First dimension. Second dimension. Environment matters. Global warming matters. Carbon tax matters. Nothing else. It's the green vote. Not necessarily the Greens vote, but it's people voting on the environment. Correct? The third factor, immigration. Res. What's res? Health. I think that's refugees and asylum seekers. So immigration, refugees and asylum seekers. That's it. So that's people voting on immigration and refugees. 3 is pref. I think that's the women's. Yeah, this is feminist position. So women should get preference for jobs or get too much preference for jobs, and women maybe either it's either. I can't remember which question it is. It's either marriage. It's basically a gender equity question. Yep. So that's feminism or anti-feminism, and then here we have tax. I think something of industrial relations, economy. So that's some sort of economic dimension, etc. You can see where this is going. Yes?
So,
Huh?
as long as it'll pick it up as a, sorry, it's on PA7, PA3. So it'll.
These are the factors.
Yeah. So it'll pick it up as a factor as long as there's a relationship, even only between two of the variables.
It can even pick up a factor that's on one of them. Let me actually, this is too complicated. I'm going to do it and say that it's just a 3-factor model because I think it will be easier for us to read. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, like how useful is it if it's only giving you 2 variables in one function?
Well,
yeah.
You could.
You might as well go back and do it.
But you can say that and not say that, right? Because look, it found the two gender variables. You know what I mean? It found the 2 law and order variables. You know, it actually didn't do too bad in terms of finding dimensions, I guess is what I'd say. It didn't actually do too bad in finding. It just depends what you're trying to do. But you're right. It depends. It actually becomes, you know, a theoretical and a research design question and stuff like that. Let's run 3, but yeah, so it depends is the short answer. You know, I mean, because if I turned around to you and said, your attitude to boat people is pretty much the same as your attitude to women. You know, they're all just it's the product of the one thing. You know what I mean? You may agree, you may not. You may say, yeah, I'm a progressive, but you might not. You might be a conservative feminist and be offended by that. Yeah. So let's look at how this is loaded now. Oof. God, it's so annoyingly messy, isn't it? So what is this loaded on now? Does anyone want to take a guess at what the first dimension is? We generally say above 0.3 or 0.4 is what we...
That could be positive or negative.
Yeah. So it's the same dimension, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's also loading on a few other things.
Like ethics or something? Or like...
I would say it's loading on boats, same, law break, death penalty, and anti-global warming. So that is the Hansen type vote, right? Like it is at quite a... Because I think the interesting thing is that dimension's still the same thing, actually, PA2. The next one, bit more pro-tax, immigration, education, environment, industrial relations, health, asylum seekers, global warming, carbon, economy, and has no movement on all those last ones, which suggests it's sort of a broadly progressive economic, environmental, immigration vote. Yeah? Or attitudes. Yeah, etc., etc. You can see that, yes? Good?
That's what, as I say, you're dipping into theory and everything else.
To actually try and understand it. And it's annoying, I agree. Now, let me move on to a couple of things. So we've got this first one we'll call broadly, let's just call this one sort of conservatism. I don't know what do I want to call this? It's anti-global warming, pro-death penalty, pro-law and order, turn back the boats. It's just sort of like a general conservatism, isn't it?
My friend put me on some Facebook page, right? All the guys commenting like this kind of people. It's pretty bad, but yeah, like Aussie bloke stuff.
Aussie bloke stuff.
Yeah, it's like the worst page ever. Like every comment is like.
Yeah, no, I know, and we know we've all been on the internet.
So it's like the Aussie bloke.
That's right.
It's the front bar crowd.
Yeah.
The front bar front. Okay, and then this one is a broadly progressive, right? On education, immigration, environment. Education, immigration, environment, economy, it seems like it. So let's just keep it at those first two, right? Looking here, we can just look at a couple of these numbers here. This is the sum of the squared loadings. Ignore it. It's sort of, this one here is particularly useful. This is the proportion of variance explained. So of all the variation in all those variables, that first dimension explains 13% of all of it. It's like an R squared almost.
Yeah.
It is an R, it's an R squared, right? It's 13% of all variation in those variables explained by that first dimension, conservatism. Another 12% is explained by the next one, sort of that progressivism. Yeah. So cumulative variation is just that addition of these. So we've explained 25% and then 31% by the time we get to the third variable. There's still a lot unexplained, but still pretty good. And then this is a nice one, which is always a nice one to quote because it's always big. Of that which we can explain, what proportion do you have? So 40% of everything we can explain exists in the first dimension, right? It's a nice one. And the cumulative proportion of variance explained. Now, this one here is interesting. This is the correlation. Remember that this is an oblique rotation. Yes? So this is one not like this. It's like the ones where they can be correlated with one another. So it turns out that there is a slight positive correlation between our conservatism and progressivism. Not very much, maybe not significant. And a heavy negative correlation between the first and the third, and a positive between the first, the second and the third. So that means let's look at the third. We need to look at the third. What is number 3? Let's pick the ones that are loading really heavily. Pref. Oh, this is the gender one again.
Yeah.
So what this is saying is that so what's that saying? It's saying that the conservatives on boats and law breaking and stuff like that, yes, are slightly economically progressive, like which we sort of know about the Hansons, but they don't like women. Or, so to speak, they're conservative on gender issues. I joke, I shouldn't say that. They are conservative on gender issues, right? Whereas these people here are a bit more progressive. It's not that they don't. It's a very... I really want to share something, but I'm not going to.
So if you write a paper on this sort of analysis and throw it up, and you're putting it out for review, whatever, the maths can't be argued about. So all you can do, the peer review process must be focused on how you interpret it.
Sort of. What actually happens? So actually, that's a good question. What actually happens? We've got all those different methods, and all those choices, you know what actually should happen? If it's a good model, it shouldn't matter which method you use. So oblique or orthogonal, right? Whether you're using like different rotations, all that sort of stuff, you should basically get the same answer. Right? I mean, you could be someone who says, that's absolutely this model, and let me show you. But if you think about it, what's convincing? What's convincing is if your model of the underlying factors holds, no matter how much you change all the assumptions. So it turns out that the main way that you end up showing that this works is that you use these and then some cluster analysis and some, and actually the important dimensions are still there no matter how you look at it. And you can actually see them in the correlation table.
Yeah. They're consistently coming up.
They're consistently coming up. Yeah? Which is an interesting, as social scientists, it's an interesting point because it's like the opposite of the way that as statisticians, who are the people who build these things for us, want to sell it. It's a bit like being sold the new MacBook or the new PCs with no ports and a USB 3, whatever it is, thing, yeah? And then a million fucking dongles, right? Like, so that you can actually, and you end up carrying around more stuff. And that's, in a sense, what statisticians make us do, I think, as social scientists. Now, they've got reasons for that. We do the opposite, but then we invent a billion theories, right? And we have lots of data sets. Probably the world's a bit simpler. But, you know, there is, within different parts of academia, inflation that occurs. And as social scientists, because we're interested in the substantive issues, we need rules to cut through. And one of those rules to cut through is that if it's important, it should come through no matter what method you're using. Does that make sense? We good? Shall we keep pushing on? We've got one more big concept to deal with. Let me see if we got to the end of this. Huh? My brain is full. What has anyone seen that Far Side comic where the kid's got his hand up and he says, "May I be excused? My brain is full." Yeah. That's how we're all feeling. Yeah. I should bring coffee to these, but then none of you will sleep tonight. Okay, so that's what it looks like as the 7 factor, which is like messy, but you can see there's negative correlations. I then actually went and did a 7 factor orthogonal, which, because it's orthogonal, there's no correlation between the variables, but actually it doesn't do that much differently. Death penalty boats, law breaking, environment people, immigration people, gender, education and health people, tax, economy, industrial relations, same-sex marriage. It sort of breaks it down that way, but actually if we do a 3-factor solution, which we just did, we have PA3 and PA2, basically the gender and the economic conservatives tend to not correlate with one another. But these ones, this broad progressive one is its own dimension. And when we do, there's an orthogonal rotation. I introduced a little funny thing here. We're going to learn a bit more about this in visualization, but you can turn simple to false rather than simple starts as true. And then it draws in other correlations that are there that it's excluded to make the map look simple. So it turns out that these conservatives don't like the environment and they don't like global warming. We did it. It's like, that's so surprising, right? Where did this come from? And look at this, and also look at gender. The feminists believe in global warming and in the environment. Who would have known, right? Right? That's negative. Negative. So that means that this conservative conservatism around boats and the death penalty and law breaking, don't like global warming and the environment.
Conspiracy with social control.
That's right, it is. Okay. Aussie blokes. Okay, now I'm introducing more stats, but this is a great one. So this is actually easier, way easier than factor analysis. This is a way that we test indexes. The big rule with this, I haven't put many instructions in here, but I've got lots of code, but the big rule with doing a Cronbach alpha is that they need to be measured in the same units and the same units, right? Cronbach's alpha. Cronbach was this famous statistician about 50 years ago, 60 years ago probably. And Cronbach, so what, well, let's just run through to here. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, this is more a falsifier, in a sense, a falsification test. The factor analysis said it looks like these, it's not really, but I'm lying when I say that because the real true statisticians would say you're wrong, it's not a falsification test. But in a sense what we're asking is, the factor analysis said we saw these dimensions. Now this is a way of saying, okay, let's pull out the dimension, the items that make up the dimension and say, do they make a good scale? Or do they make a good index? Now the factor analysis turned out it didn't care how things were coded. You can code them yes, no, 1, 0. You can code them as continuous. You can code them in, you know what I mean? It will actually just deal with it. It's very smart. Cronbach alpha, not so smart. It needs everything to be on the same dimension. So you need to normalize your variables, which I think I've done here, or have I screwed that up? Did I? Oh no, I haven't even normalized them. But I guess it sees them as in the same dimensions. Anyway, but it can really screw things up if you don't have them measured in, if you have them measured in very different units. These ones are measured in number of crimes per 1,000. It seems to be fine with that. So what we're doing, I'm just going to show you the command. We go crimes. We put crimes. We select. These are the items. Now I'm doing it properly, selecting the items that were found in the first dimension. Yes? I put it through this as matrix. It turns out that alpha really wants things to be basically stripped of, they're not data frames, but stripped down as matrices, at least most of the time, at least it used to. So I've done that, and that gets rid of the names and values and all that. And then we get results. So I'll just go and run it, so we can all have it. We can look at it in R. Are we all following along? Are you guys running it too? Is anyone running it?
Yeah.
And is it working?
It all works.
That's good. So we go through this, and we go boom. Crimes not found. That would be because I have got rid of crimes. I've got to go and make crimes. Sorry, so I've just got to run this, yeah. Okay, so now we have results, and they're okay. So what this gives us is the most important number here is this thing called a raw alpha. Think of it as like a it's like a correlation, but it only goes from 0 to 1. And this number, the rule of thumb is You want it above 0.7. You could kind of deal with it being 0.6, above 0.6, between 0.6 and 0.7. You really want it to be above 0.8. Turns out that if it's below 0.6, it's in your interest not to use it as an index generally. Why? Because there's just so much random noise, there's no way it can correlate with anything else. So sometimes you go like, oh, I want to use this variable, when you get a bad combat alpha. But the more and more I've experimented with data, the more and more I've realized that no, if you don't get a combat alpha above 0.6 or even 0.7, you don't want to use it. Why? Because there's just nothing it could correlate with.
But that's the one where it says raw alpha.
This is it. Now this is all on here. That's the first one you look at. 0.94. Point is it's huge. Right? Now partly that's very inflated because it gets inflated by the number of variables you put into it. That's the first thing we look at. The second thing we do is we then go down to here to this. Reliability. So alpha is a measure of reliability. Remember a reliability, it's like where you remember there's validity and reliability. Validity means that you're measuring what you say you're measuring, or what you think you're measuring. Does the measure match the concept? Validity, reliability says that would it accurately measure it, give you the same answer if you measured it over using different methods or using the same method over different times. So this is saying, really what it's saying is, we've got this underlying dimension 1 of crimes, and we're saying if we measured it, how reliable is it? That's our measure of reliability, that raw alpha. This one says, what happens if we drop one of these variables to the raw alpha? Now, it's a funny measure, but it turns out to be super useful. Because, not in this case, because if you can imagine, if this was a bad variable, like if it was not correlated, say we threw in here, I don't know, number of burgers sold, something, right? Then this would probably be 0.5, but then if we number of variable if item dropped, if we removed burgers, it would probably go up to 0.94. Right, so what you're looking here is anything that goes above 0.94. Well, it doesn't, so then the index is actually good, or if we keep everything in.
So, for example, if you put that burgers variable in there, it would probably say like 0.2 or something on this scale.
No, if you put the burgers in there, what would happen would be that this would say 0.2, the raw alpha, because it would be a shit scale.
Yeah.
But this, down here where burger was, say it was offensive language, this would say 0.94. All the rest of them would still say it's still a crap scale. But this one would say, yeah, remove this. This is the guy this is the weakest link in the chain. Interesting.
Below that.
You want this one to be really big. Yeah, you want it to be big.
Yeah.
If it's big, cut it. Basically. It's weird, but it does make sense. And what you actually have to do is iteratively repeat it. So if it says, if you run it and it says this one's crap, and you go, knock it out, rerun it. Oh, now that one's crap, knock it out. And eventually you get down to a sort of a maximal set. Yeah, like a set that works. Yes? We're going to see an example in a second of one.
So all it's doing is telling you the health of your index.
It's telling you the health of your index and whether your index gets better if you cut things out. What did you say, Milan?
Just my brain's working so hard trying to get.
I know, you're welcome. So, I mean, you can see one of the other things that you'll see here. So this is the correlation between, interesting, this is the correlation between the variable and this variable and the whole index. You can see these are highly correlated with the index. Yep, like the 0.8, that's huge. They're basically measuring the same thing. Yeah, there's lots of other data there, but you don't need it. That's it. Good? So we can then repeat that for each of the other dimensions. So that's what we're going to do. And what we'll find as we do it, actually I'll jump it. Well, I'll do the second one. Yeah. So this one is factor 2, liquor offences, offensive conduct, marijuana, other theft, resist and hinder officer. You know that there's there's 3 laws that they talked about. I don't know, did they ever get rid of them? There were 3 laws that you just get hit with when you pissed off a police officer.
When you're pissed off at that police
No, when you pissed off a police officer.
Oh.
You would get offensive language, resist arrest, and hinder an officer.
But you get all of them at the same time.
Yeah. It's called the trifecta. And it just was basically, you pissed off a cop. That's what it was. Yeah, friend. Not friend, right? Yeah, kind of friend, kind of someone you know really well. No. Anyway, so.
With your reviews like unfairly, steadily did all this stuff that he didn't do, but that trifecta.
He got the trifecta, yeah. Was he walking around and blind out of his mind at
I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't say. Okay. His story might be different to the truth.
Okay, so here we go. So let's look at this one. So our second one, which is get drunk, piss off a police officer, get strip searched. Raw alpha is pretty good, 0.8. We're happy with this. We then look at how it goes if we drop it. Turns out it goes down. These ones are really nicely correlated with it. Marijuana doesn't affect it that much, so that says it's a little bit separate, but it's okay. These are really important. Other theft and resist hinder officer. Yeah, and if we look at the correlations, actually they're all pretty correlated, but offensive conduct seems to be the big one. Okay, fine. That one seems, we're happy with that.
So there are well-established indices that have been sort of built up and used? Or
These ones that we've come up with?
No. I mean, sort of out there in...
These combat alpha?
Yeah.
Like, literally, this is the most... Probably the most. Okay, I'll just Google it for you, just to show you on Google Scholar.
So do you use this to say, look, I've come up with a new index, and
yes, it is. It's like the first question you'll get when you come up with a new index. Let's just cron batch alpha. I really promise I only teach you the most important stuff. Yeah.
Working this out by hand would have been take a really long time.
Yeah, but it's not that complicated an equation. It's just a pain. It would have been a pain to calculate, yes. Yeah. So here we go. It's, I wonder where the original Cronbach alpha, oh, here it is. Here it is. 1951. I lied to you. It's 70 years old. And it has 40,000 citations. It's pretty good. You could hang your hat on that, but I don't think he has a hat anymore.
internal structure of tests.
There you go. So this is 101. So let's just go and we'll look at this last one. So fraud, steal from person, steal from store, transport, which is shoplifting, receiving stolen goods, transport. Ready?
What's the transport variable?
I think transport is like transport fines and stuff.
Crimes on transport.
Yeah, I don't know, or is it might be. It could be. I don't know. To be honest,
Just doing something wrong in the buses.
On the bus.
it could be doing something wrong, or it could be like driving, drink or something. I don't know. Driving. I don't know. Anyway, let's have a look. So reliable. Oh, boom.
Yeah.
Crap measure. Crash. But reliability of item dropped. Ooh, Look at that. If we were, it's almost like I designed it. I didn't, but this is really good, right? So transport is just way off on its own, doing its own thing. Yeah? And, yeah, that's it. I mean, transport is off on its own, doing its own thing, and kick it, and then we would, so if we did kick it, what would, oh, we know it'd go up to 0.77, but would it even get, would there be something else to get rid of then? So we repeat it, it is now 0.77, and it doesn't really get better if we drop anything else. And the correlations, they're pretty good, aren't they? Okay, yes, so we have these three indexes. We could then go and construct it by just adding them all together. Good?
So once we get the three kind of factors, you know what I mean, you then do this to see if they're valid.
You do this is not valid. This is reliable.
Right,
yeah, but basically, it's honestly, it is actually. It's just saying, does it work as an index? Yes, it's both. It's they call it reliability.
That's what we just did, and then you see if it's reliable by doing this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So in a sense, the factor analysis. This is a way of going. Let's just say whether we really can add it together, and if it passes this test, yes, add it together.
So you're being expected to do all three of these steps, right?
Yeah, that's what you would do. I mean, you don't necessarily have to, but you will see. As I would imagine that almost probably 70% of your data sets will cite a Cronbach alpha at somewhere. Of your papers will have a Cronbach alpha cited for index. Okay. We might. Okay, so last, I think this is just the last one now is, oh, whoa.
The next one is
Tables and graphs, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've just got a couple of examples here. So if it's probably better if we run this. Oh, yeah, let's run this ourselves. So this is pretty amazing. This is actually, it's generated this because it's actually interacting with the website's code. But if we run this here, so this is an SJT, so SJ table, factor analysis. This one, you literally, it actually would calculate the number. You literally could run just fjt.fa primes, and it will do all of those steps for you and spit out an answer. It's...
What are you talking about?
I know! Why have you been wasting our bloody time? I know, look at this, look at this. Look at this, I could have just said, so this is how you do factor analysis, everyone. Here's the code. Ready?
Takes a while.
No.
Margin's too slow.
No. You are.
Okay, so it does the...
There you go. So I guess this whole class could have been just run like this. So you run that code and it produces this and you interpret it, and that's how you be sociologists. What this says, this is a pretty smart piece of code. What it does, so it's highlighted, this has made a really nice thing. It's highlighted the brain work. It has highlighted in black those where they're most heavily loaded. It is highlighted in red, you can't really see it, but it's highlighted in red those that are loading across multiple factors, so therefore they're not loading cleanly. What does that mean?
So
it means that robbery really captures 2 dimensions, and offensive conduct really sits across 2 dimensions.
So they don't belong to.
They belong to both, or it has elements of both. It's like
yeah.
it's like a liger. It's the child of a tiger and a lion. So, and you can see it even here, they've calculated the Cronbach alphas. Literally, it did everything we just did. Amazing, right? But the point is you wouldn't have understood it properly if we didn't go through all those steps. Yeah? I think, so good?
Yeah, look at the grey.
So grey are the ones that it's not, it uses a very simple equation. You can change these in settings, but the greyed out means it's not the primary place that it's loaded. I think what it does is it uses you can look if you look up the instructions, what it's doing is it uses an equation which it says that it will go red if the difference between this and the next loading is less than 0.1. So if I can see on my computer here, this one here, there we go, 0.49. So it's loaded, but it's actually loaded straight across factors 1 and 2, offensive conduct. Whereas this one is loaded across 2, 0.43 and 0.56, but the difference is more than 0.1, so they're fine with it. And robbery, which I've got to explain to Young, he's misspelt, is robbery. It's great. Is loading on factors 3 and 1. Cool, right? One last thing, and then I feel like I should let you go because brain's full. There are some functions with this FA diagram that are quite nice. So sorting, these are actually defaults that are used. But if we do use a couple of other simple ones, like so to turn simple to false, that's all I've done on this one. It then introduces, actually it makes it really ugly and makes the world a lot more complex a place. But you see that actually there's the correlations that it's not really picking up on. So it says that this, that's interesting. This factor here has got a negative correlation with liquor offences and with steal from persons. I really wonder whether these are not geographic. I would imagine crime is quite highly geographic. Like, where do you think crime happens?
I was there on Wednesday. I couldn't believe what happened to me in the first 2 minutes.
What happened?
I'll go into another time, but we can talk about it now. I was in the bathrooms and you heard some guy when I go to wash my hands, it's like he just starts pissing in the sink on the floor. And he's like trying to explain this. I'm like, oh, that's okay. I was just gonna go. And he's like a junkie or something. And then he's like, who are you with? I'm like, I'll just walk away from everybody. He's like, hey, come back here. Say that. Don't speak to me like that. And he's like, started chasing me.
Oh,
so, yeah. I was like, oh no. And so I ran into some shop that was busy. And hopefully he didn't come in. He set up.
Gonna
beat
beat you up.
And then went away. I was like 2 minutes in the game there, and that's what happened. I was like, this place really is pretty.
Wow.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that the high crime areas are, I think it correlates with, there's busy areas like the city, right, and drinking. But then it correlates with socioeconomic status. I imagine it's socioeconomic in the city, and then there's socioeconomic in rural areas, and I imagine there's also a correlation with indigenous communities. You know?
And station.
And what?
Around station.
Yeah.
Train stations?
Yeah.
Why train stations? Because there's lots of people.
A lot of people and who were stealing from.
So,
it's just like, I don't know, that's why the Northern Beaches always says they didn't want a train station because to keep the riffraff out from like the Western suburbs or whatever they.
Oh my god, that's gross. You're probably right.
Yeah, a lot of people that actually said.
That's why there are no trains to Bondi and Coogee.
Oh, it has a Bondi Junction.
Yeah.
Oh, so they're just trying-
They fight against. Really?
Yeah, it's been flagged every 10 years or so.
Oh yeah, you know this. So what is so do all the beach the beachside towns in Australia in Sydney don't have don't have trains to them.
Corrales train station.
Yeah, look what happened there.
That's it.
Yeah. No, but she said it,
Okay.
yeah.
End of story. Was that useful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole new concept.
I think it should go first, like before all those univariate.
Yeah, can I say, that's what they said. I did this in like week 10 or week 11 last time, and everyone went, why didn't you do this like right at the beginning? Now everything makes sense. I'm like, it's actually not, it's not like, it's chapter 17 in the textbook, but you're the second group who said this should go before descriptive statistics. This is better than means.
The thing is, clean data and doing the univariate analysis and all that is a little time consuming. It's
Yeah.
one by one, it's like, this one is rapidly and
This is generally new as well.
This is genuinely, you have no
I haven't
idea.
encountered this at all before.
It's like, like last semester for the assignment we did, which would be really useful to create a data set that's like variables that are relevant to your topic.
Yeah, you can use it to do, so this is called, what we've done here is called exploratory factor analysis. And so one of the things about it, is that it's seen as something you can do without knowing anything.
Yeah.
Which is like being handed a rope long enough to hang yourself with in the scientific, because we know in science we know in life we can find patterns in tea leaves,
Yeah.
right? And so in science, one of the ways we're supposed to try to avoid that is by having hypotheses first and, not data dredging and all that sort of stuff. So but the other side of it is that if you want to know, do you know what this is? Spotify. Do you listen to Spotify? Do you have your recommended 5 or 7 playlists? I'm sure they are dimension reductions. Right? That's why, like, one of them is like, a certain type of pop, another one is like ambient relaxation, and, one is Australian or whatever, one is, what are your dimensions in your, that's how we should have started this. What are the dimensions in your Spotify? Anyone want to share any of theirs? Do you use Spotify?
Yeah, well, I think I find that a lot of, like, it's almost like they take from, like, quite a small pool.
I agree, it's
There's
too
so
small.
much overlap, and, like, you'll often, like, your friends will have the exact same playlist as you, or, like, in cafes and restaurants and stuff, they'll play, like, really similar playlists to yours that are just recommended.
Yeah, I agree. I now listen to the radio so that I can get some variety.
And they based it off who your favourite artists are, right?
I think they base it off based it off your listening.
Mine's basically exactly that. Like, it's just some stuff.
So I think what they've done is they've done factor analysis, and the problem is they've found what loads very heavily on the factors, and that's why everyone is getting those things.
If everyone likes the same artist, then they'll probably get similar playlists.
Well, or even just everyone has, even if you don't like the same artist, you have similar factors.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like the artist that you like, but on your playlist as well. Like it's like similar,
Similar.
So kind of people like kind of similar bands. Stuff.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think they really have screwed it up, Spotify, with too much.
I'm
Huh?
an Apple Music guy.
But you have the same thing?
The choice is the same.
Huh?
Yeah, it does.
It just gets a little bit too repetitive.
Yeah.
Okay, what questions do you have? Can we go home now?
We can go now?
Yes. Can I just ask, do you have any, those little stickies you wrote last time were so useful. Because this, do you notice I tried to follow a similar format to last week? Did you notice that? Where I had the theory up front, not too much, and then we went through lots of examples that were systematic, and we practiced interpreting the tables. Good? We like that? Just keep it up? Is that right? Is that the advice? Yes?
Well, the piping thing, yeah.
And then we add a bit of technicalities at the beginning, like learning some more piping and stuff. Hey, guess what? I'm not presenting next week. Oh, please reach out to me. Don't suffer in silence. WhatsApp is your friend.
This week you will be very busy, I think so.
How are we going? Can I just do a quick round robin?
Yeah.
Can I have green and red? Who's feeling green? Who's feeling red? Who's feeling orange?
With what? The presentation?
Yeah.
Red.
No, you're not. You're fine.
Oh, you know?
You're green. Red. Okay. All right.
Do you want to see some factor analysis?
You can do whatever you want. Okay. So no, don't lie. It's finished.
I haven't done anything.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we only doing, we do not doing multi-variable analysis, right?
Yeah, no, you're literally just going to get up, describe the study, and then and very briefly describe the study and why it's important, and then go through the descriptive statistics and then a correlation matrix or some bivariate, like you might, that's interesting. Show us what seems to be going on in the data set, what's important, some important highlights, and tell us maybe where you're going to go with it.
And next week we are doing presentation and submit the report.
Yes.
But that is
no assessment. Yeah. Just
So before just participation, I guess.
just for you to.
If we come to the regression, can we refer to the regression models in the algorithm? Because
you can. I mean, I think you can say, like, you can get up and say, I studied this paper, I chose the paper because it has this really amazing finding that I'm going to get to in week 13. However, you can see it's emerging, but you can also see that there are these other correlations that are there, that maybe it could be these other things. So therefore, you can't draw these conclusions from the correlation, or actually you can draw the conclusions, and I don't even know why they bothered to do a regression. Didn't need to. Yeah?
because, what I'm doing is, the most interesting thing is happening in the regression.
Yeah, of course. It's always, that's the way it is. We need to save something for the end.
Right.
Can we go home?
Bye. Yes. And I will just say, just so you know, you will be speaking for 12 minutes, and you know, I'll show you why. I have like 4 of these.
Oh, really?
These are the coolest. Yeah, they really work. Because if we don't, you're all going to get so bored of each other's voices, like you do of mine. So what this does, I just put this up.
What about you just have things to speak for 10 minutes?
No,
That's 12?
This makes it 12. Yeah, 12 minutes. But actually, it'll be bigger. It'll be one that goes for like, it'll be like this and just kicks down, and then it goes. And you can watch it. It means I don't have to stand there and go 1 minute, 2 minutes, ding, 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 half time.
So want to be 12? What about you per day?
Less is fine.
Okay.
Less is good.
So, what if it's like 8 minutes?
That's fine. I don't mind.
There is no more than 12. That's the point. Okay, cool.
It's kind of like a practice presentation for later.
It is. It's a practice presentation. And Young might be here as well, so watch out. Oh!
Is the final one also 11 to 12
Yes.
minutes? Okay. Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
So, how many words do I need for final
Same.
report? It's the same,
Same length. 600 to 1,000.
So how many words do you reckon that a 10-minute presentation is?
I know. So 10 minutes, you basically speak at about 100 to 120 words a minute. So it's about 1,000 words.
So if the second one is the same length, does that mean that you wouldn't include univariate or bivariate analysis for the second one?
In terms of length,